Chapter 79 Visiting My Fiancée. In the study of the Sananbo mansion, there was no rusty smell of the palace intrigue that was about to unfold in a big way. Fan Jian smiled, thinking that although this child in front of him is smart, his experience in political struggle is indeed a little too little. It seems that he will have to be taught slowly in the future. His Majesty has been on horseback all his life. How could he be afraid of this? It's just that he doesn't really want to see his own father and son turn against each other, so he's using this to warn the latter party. The rear party? As of right now, it seems to be the Empress, the Crown Prince, the eldest princess. Or there is also the Chancellor. Fan Xian continued to ask, His Majesty the Emperor should have a better way of resolving this matter. You have said before that the Inner Treasury's estate has always been supervised by the Supervisory Yuan, so why would you choose me? It's simple. Fan Jian looked at him, but his gaze seemed to be looking extremely far away, as if looking at another person, because I suggested that he choose you. Fan Xian raised an eyebrow, knowing that his father would not offer any further explanation, so he turned to ask, Then why did Chen Pingping object? Because he suggested that His Majesty not choose you. Fan Jian said, Chen Pingping has always believed that you should take a different path. The head of the Supervisory Academy was also so concerned about himself. Fan Xian suddenly thought of the stone monument at the entrance of the Supervisory Academy, and finally couldn't hold back the strong doubt in his heart as he asked, Why is there a stone monument at the entrance of the Supervisory Academy? There would be your mother's name? It's very simple. Ning Que originally didn't have a Supervisory Academy in the first place. Your mother said back then that there was a Supervisory Academy, right? Fan Jian laughed, seeming to have great pleasure in his heart. So, Ning Que had a Supervisory Academy. Fan Xian's heart was beating harder than a kangaroo's, and with his mouth wide open, he didn't come back to his senses for half a day, thinking of the words that were so familiar in his previous life. God said, Let there be light, and there was light. As the conversation between father and son continued, Fan Xian realized for the first time today that the Yi family had such a terrifying power, and that it was the Yi family that had single-handedly supported the faltering imperial government when Qing was in a financial crisis, and that the supervisory board, which was currently terrifying all the officials and used by His Majesty to unite the entire power of Qing, was actually his mother's. The supervisory board was established at the suggestion of the emperor, and had been established since the founding of the court. It was her mother who suggested the establishment of this institution, and she handled and provided everything from the establishment of the institution to the huge expenses. No wonder the name Yi Qingmei was written on the door of the Supervisory Academy. No wonder he had grown up under the watchful eye of the Supervisory Academy since he was a child. Fan Xian gazed at his father for half a day, shook his head and sighed. Father, don't be angry if I say something. Don't worry, when have I ever been angry with you? Fan Jian seemed to guess what he was about to say, a somewhat wry smile on his face. Fan Xian thought about the wording for a moment, and ultimately found that he didn't know how to organize his language, and said directly with a bitter smile, I'm now really skeptical about how old mother looked at you back then. Ha 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 ha, don't forget your mother's name. Sananbo. Fan Jian seemed like he hadn't laughed so happily in many years, waving his hand and letting him leave the study. Fan Xian walked out into the garden, thinking, what does this mean? Suddenly understood, Yi Qingmei, Yi Qingmei. Look down on the world whiskers. Father didn't blame you, right? Fan Ruo worriedly looked at her brother. In fact, she and Fan Xian do not look alike. The only most similar is the long eyelashes and white skin. Fan Xian smiled bitterly and said, Blaming is not one of the most frightening aspects of education. The most frightening thing is actually the exchange of ideas over a long period of time. Parents always think that they should have a thoughtful conversation with their children, but they don't realize that this is the most unbearable thing. When they are in their youth, but they are forced to get close to the shroud of stale air. He is thinking of the scene he just saw with feeling. When he crossed the flower hall, he saw that Fan Xizhe is full of impatience to listen to Lu's lecture. Lu saw him before he stopped talking. He cheekily brought Fan Xizhe over. Fan Ruo sighed. This is something that can't be helped. She suddenly thought of the case that was making a lot of noise in Kyoto during the day and asked curiously, "Brother, you once said that if you do something you don't want to do, it must need a very clear and strong reason behind it. There must be some reason why you went up to the Kyoto prefecture today to fight the lawsuit." Fan Xian nodded. Fan Ruo didn't ask what exactly the reason was, but simply asked, "Did you get the result you wanted?" Fan Xian smiled and said, "It's quite satisfactory. At least I know exactly how my father stood up inside the court, and I know that the original Fan family's influence in the court is a lot more than I thought. As for that reason, you can guess. I don't know the effect. After all, it's not possible for me to turn into a mosquito and eavesdrop on the conversations of those bigwigs in the palace." Fan Ruo snapped, "If it's for these things, there's no need to take risks." Fan Xian smiled and explained, "Anyway, I've made up my mind to beat up that little pipsqueak surnamed Gua, so it's good to see how deep the water in Kyoto is in the meantime." "Hey! I don't understand." Fan Xizhe, who had been listening from the side for half a day, finally couldn't help but shout. Fan Ruo smiled and took out a ruler, and Fan Xizhe yelled, "You want to beat me even if you don't understand?" Fan Ruo's smile was oppressive. "How many times have I said to call Big Brother?" "I know I'm wrong, Big Brother." Fan Xizhe was small for his age, but the treacherous businessman mindset in his bones made it so that he would absolutely not eat his words. Fan Xian looked at him with amusement. "I looked at your revised plan today and thought that you really have some talent. How could you not even understand what your sister and I were saying?" Fan Xizhe angrily yelled, "What shroud, educational session, who knew you guys had so many weird words?" But that last one was understandable. He hated to say, "Hey. Wrong, Big Brother, that surnamed was son of a bitch last time in the restaurant bullied me. You should fight. How has been delayed until last night to fight?" "No matter, next time there is such a fun and exciting thing, you must take me." Fan Xian looked at him with a bitter smile, thinking that you don't always want to play the role of a street bully. Their brother and sister, two people talking, and did not avoid the side of the eyes of the bone-turned Fan Xizhe. This is Fan Xian's decision, on the one hand, is to take this to let loose clearly know what he is thinking, so as to avoid the future because of the two sides of the information convection is not smooth and lead to gunfire, just like the former US and China military exchanges, which side of the maneuvers always have to send an observer is not it. Fan Xizhe is naturally an observer. On the other hand is to let this stubborn brother gradually adapt to the atmosphere of this Fan family. Three treasures. Fan Xian believes that the habits formed by osmosis will allow some people to make certain decisions before making more thinking on the side of light. After Fan Xizhe went to bed, Fan Xian turned to his sister and asked, "Is the appointment ready?" Fan Ruo nodded and smiled sweetly. "What if I'm recognized? If people in Kyoto know that you're actually in such a hurry to see your new daughter-in-law, they'll only laugh to death, and it might upset a lot of people." "Whatever." Fan Xian waved his hand in some annoyance. "I have to finalize this matter first." Early in the morning, the carriage of Kyoto's Guardian Yi Mansion stopped at the entrance of the Sananbo Mansion, and on the carriage, Yi Linger waited with a slight sense of anxiety. After a while, Fan Ruo led a young man with a waxy face and slightly hunched back out of the mansion. Yi Linger's eyes lit up and she greeted her. Yi Linger's Scopolamine bowed and said, "Thank you, Miss Fan." Then she turned to the slightly hunchbacked young man and asked with a smile, "Sir, is Lord Fei's student?" The young man smiled, his waxy yellow complexion paired with a few wrinkles at the corners of his eyes, not looking in good spirits. He arched his hand and responded, "Precisely." Yi Linger said, "Tough job, sir." The young doctor smiled and politely replied, "The patient is important, we'd better get going." Yi Linger and Fan Ruo got into the first carriage. The young doctor got into the latter. He sat on the seat and found that this carriage was extremely spacious, very different from the common style in Kyoto, and there were no unnecessary decorations inside. It seemed that this Yi house was ultimately born from the sands, and there was always some austere atmosphere. The young doctor is naturally Fan Xian, got up early this morning, and Ruo's eyebrow pencil foundation helped, put on a makeup. This is still a child with Fei Jia learned some fur, but it seems to be effective. In fact, the main reason for his confidence is that he believes that he already has a small reputation in Kyoto, but the people who have really seen himself is still very few, at least that Yilinger and the Lin family lady has not seen. When he thought of the Lin family's young lady that he would soon meet, Fan Xian's heartbeat suddenly accelerated, no matter how he planned to do it in the future. After all, the other party was now nominally his fiancée, and the white girl that he had always been harboring in his heart was obviously from a noble family as well, and if he wanted to have a wife and a concubine, that was basically out of the question, so it seemed that he had to make some kind of a choice. As the carriage moved forward, Fan Xian also became more and more nervous. Because the direction of the carriage was the royal courtyard, where the Lin family girl, his fiancée, was currently residing, and he was posing as a doctor today, which in itself was extremely absurd, but when he thought of the chicken legs, and when he thought of the Yi family, and when he thought of the so-called wife, he realized that he was going to be with you for the rest of his life. The so-called wife is the one who will be spraying on the pillow with you face to face for the rest of your life, so Fan Xian can't help but be cautious yet bold and absurd, just like what he thought before he came to the capital. No matter what, he has to take a look at it first. Is it cute? Pretty? Is she cute? Is she pretty?